Hello, this is Cryptolyze. I hope you are well this Monday, 13 November 2023. It is with pleasure that we meet today to talk about crypto, to talk about BTC, and it starts right away. As a reminder, you always have the possibility of having free access to the educational course, which is a 60-hour training course worth €400, which allows you to learn blockchain, crypto, investment, technical analysis, trading, everything to become profitable. Through 130 videos, 400 pages of guides, quizzes to find out where you are in your progress, and all for free. To have access to this lifelong training, simply use the platform of one of our partners. Everything is explained in the comments and descriptions. We start the news right away with FTX suing Bybit to recover $1 billion. So in terms of history, it's a bit complex because there are two phases. There was the first phase when there was the collapse of FTX, in which we had Bybit, which managed to recover almost $1 billion in funds. So very important. When it was impossible to withdraw the funds. Exactly, it's not super precise in terms of the different articles I've read. It is unclear if it was after they were unable to make all the withdrawals that the withdrawals of Bybit funds were withdrawn, or if it was before. Personally, from what I have read, what comes up most often is before, in anticipation, because at the same time, logically, there are a lot of people who have managed to remove them. Afterward, it is true that given the amount and the fact that it was noted as VIP request prioritize, so that means that there had been preferential treatment which was given to Bybit to recover its funds. And precisely, FTX wishes to recover part of its funds, or even all of it, given that it is Bybit plus the companies that revolve around it, in particular Marana, which is Bybit's investment company. So there is a trial which will certainly take place, and there are other elements. The second part of this story is mainly linked to BitDAO. So who is the entity behind Bybit, which is the Bit token, and therefore BitDAO, the decentralized entity which is behind it, which was renamed Mantle, and which released a new token which is called the MNT, in which we can exchange the BIT bits with MNTs for a ratio of 1-to-1, which is rather classic in something that we know in a form of rename in which we are going to rebrand the brand. Well, in this case, they saw that FTX was starting to mint its bits in MNT and refused to see them with a community vote, in quotes. And I like this in quotes because, yes, we don't forget not that BitDAO is, yes, a DAO, but when a DAO is dominated by 3-4 people, is it still really decentralized or not? It's up to you to tell me what you think. Do you think FTX should really sue Bybit? Is it more the classic game in which they managed to withdraw? Well, they managed to withdraw. Is it normal for people to block after switching to their new token? I want to tell you, who wouldn't do it after the question of legality will be decided by notably the trial? Besides, good news for the holders of FTX debt, it is that since Solana has re-accelerated the rise once again, we are not far from the $55, in which we therefore have a valuation additional of all the balances which are held by FTX, and here currently we are really not far from completing the total loss that FTX had thanks to this old acceleration, thanks precisely to this runaway of the ground. It precisely allows to have a reduction in the pressure at level of FTX's debt on the various debtors. On the other hand, it will be necessary at some point to sell the token. Will the floor be sold as is, or will it be sold OTC? You always know, for me, my prerogative, I think that it will necessarily be sold OTC. Next to it, we have Near Foundation, which continues to make news, which is in a partnership with EigenLab. So Eigen, you may not have heard of it, although I have talked about it a few times on the channel. It is a foundation which specializes in the creation of Ethereum rollups, and especially in the notion of restaking. So restaking is something that is rather controversial in the Ethereum economy and in the Ethereum community, notably Vitalik Buterin, who is rather against it, which actually allows you to use Ethereum staking to protect other protocols, which is a bit like what Atom is trying to do with shared security in that you can protect your actions directly with Atom. There, the idea is to also use the stacked Ethereum to be able to protect other blockchains which are interfaced. Foundation's main aim is to create and finally to facilitate accessibility to bridges, and in particular a whole part of interfacing with Ethereum. Near protocol, which really tries to center itself, to specialize in the notion of BOS, which is Blockchain Operating System. In any case, it's certain that things are moving quite a bit in terms of Near. If it's a project that interests you, I've made a lot of videos on it. Don't hesitate to watch on the channel. At the macroeconomic level, we have one and only real figure that we will look at this week, which will be Tuesday, November 1430, which will be the CPI. CPI, which is the representation of inflation, which is most watched, particularly by the Fed. Note that during Jerome Powell's last speech, we had a big chill, which was launched on the fact that potentially we could still have an increase in the party if we ever had an easing of the market, which was too strong because that the goal was really to get down to the 2% objectives. I admit that the forecast shows us a fall from 3.7 to 3.3, so we are slowly moving towards 2%, even if the services are having difficulty going down. I have already explained this to you in particular in my video of this that Saturday. I invite you to go watch it if you haven't seen it. In which, in fact, the CPI core will be really monitored if we ever have a sufficiently strong change in inflation. That means that we will have a real breathing space in the markets to be able to continue to push, because mainly this means that we will be able to have the implementation of the pivot for a certain time, because the goal of the Fed and why the Fed has increased so quickly and so strongly is to hold inflation. And if we have an inflation which is sinking, that means that we will have equity which will grow. In any case, that is my vision of the thing. Especially since we have oil starting its week towards something that is more like the 75 once again. I remind you that for me, we are going to be setting up a range between 75 and 85 in terms of oil, or even a tad higher. Above, because we have alongside the confrontation of the rest of the world, in which we want oil below 80 and OPEC, which wants oil above 80, to be able to make maximum profit from the production which they remains, which is rather logical given that oil is a finished product. And so there we have inflation, which will be dependent on what happens with oil. So we will really have to monitor this element, and I think that we will be in a form of oscillation, which will at the same time be a form of geopolitical fight over oil. At one point it was the dollar. At one point it was gold. Now it's clearly going to be oil. Finally it comes back because it was still the case with the first oil shock. But here we come back to the forefront again with oil as the engine of inflation and the engine of equity. Because equity, therefore, that is to say, stocks are mainly waiting for an easing at the Fed level to be able to really start to rise again. We have also reached with the SPF 500 a really critical level, which is the 4,440, in which here we have a start to the week, which is rather negative. Don't forget, 70% of the time when we start a day, while the U.S. market is not open, generally we swallow the candle and go in the other direction. So that would mean that we would go and retest here the 4,500, which is the level that I gave precisely in Saturday's analysis, the analysis of the weekly. The important area for me, too, is gold, which will give us good information on the relaxation of the market in which we have a good distribution of Wyckoff, which is in progress with a BCR STSO. So we are well on the way of distribution with an uptrust here, which went to get the liquidity which was left by the BC. So by the buying climax, we see here that we had a bearish inflection, but we did not go and get the liquid from these zones here. So for me, we did not do a breakoff structure, and we are waiting for the breakoff structure. There we are in a zone either of retest or of reacceleration. So for me, it will play out either we will do a UTAD in which we will retest this part and then start the rise again, look for the liquidity of the UT, or we will validate the break of structure here with a bearish break. And there at that moment, we will have a nice validation, which makes in course, we will wait for a retest, and there we will have very nice shorts to go at least, to look for the 1,600 for me at the gold level. So if we have this setup, it will be rather positive, otherwise we will continue to push, before making the distribution and validating a classic return. We don't forget that gold is certainly the most manipulated asset in the world, mainly thanks to ETFs. Besides, question, will it be the same thing with BTC ETFs? Will we also have strong manipulation? This remains to be determined. Besides, speaking of BTC, we are moving forward. We are still in this setup in which we had the first phase of acceleration, ranging zone for 250 days. Which was long. It is really the phase of lateralization, which is really very hard, in which we held a support, and we were afraid of breaking very strongly, and we could not break the resistance. Resistance which was broken, resistance of 32,000, in which we had the upward acceleration which took place in 2 stages. First acceleration, lateralization for a week. Second acceleration, we could wait another week for lateralization. Namely that we are here in a decrease at the level of the bullish acceleration. We are here at the level of the CME on the RSI with an RSI which is overbought, and therefore it is rather classic when we are in these phases acceleration. Is it normal? Yes. Are we going to stay there? Potentially. Don't forget that the RSI, we can remain overbought for a very long time and continue to push. This is not a real sign of selling, especially since we have here a bearish divergence which is very present, which we know already, in which we had a bullish acceleration, a breathing at the level of the RSI on the daily, in which we are having almost the same thing, here acceleration, while we have an RSI which is in sinking. Slightly, so we have a small divergence, but once again the divergences can drag on for a long time. Look closely at the temporality of this bullish acceleration in which we drag the divergence throughout this period. Okay, because I just noted here, but we can clearly see that we have the beautiful divergence which goes up to here. Therefore, at a given moment, we must take into consideration that we can go relatively high by having this bearish divergence before it is activated. And it could very well be deactivated with simply here a break of the previous RSI. And at that moment, we would be in a pattern that would be different. So for me, we are still in an overexposure linked mainly to news from ETFs. In any case, to rumors of validation of ETFs. It is possible that as soon as there is a new rumor, we will again find an upward acceleration at the level of BTC. I am always in the prerogative of protecting myself. And it is really the most important thing to protect myself, to protect my capital, to protect the positions that I already have for a long time, and that I have already built since. Sometime in relation to the possibility of a sell the news, this is something that I am working on and in which we are addressing. In any case, we are taking advantage of this upward acceleration because it is good for the portfolio. It allows gridbots in particular to continue to make their profit, to take a fairly strong portion of profit, in which we have also taken a portion of the profit on certain corners. Profit, but we always keep the visibility of the preparation of the bull run, and in which we benefit from this acceleration. Bullish. In the short term, what is interesting to see is that we find ourselves in this classic weekend ranging zone, but in which we have not precisely implemented the principles of liquidation. I don't know if you noticed, but usually on Sunday evening or Monday morning we have an upward acceleration, then a bearish acceleration where we liquidate precisely the high and low parts. This is not the case at all. We have an RSI which is sinking. Well, we don't have too many signals, but on the other hand, when we start to look a little at the equity, we clearly see the equity which has been built during this entire period, during this weekend, in which we mainly built what? Well, shorts, because quite simply we are overexposed. When we see hop, we're going to get back here. It's complicated to buy in this zone. It's really very, very complicated to buy this zone. There, or even it is almost impossible. You would have to buy this zone and place your stop here. We know very well that this is classic in terms of liquidity. So if we ever have a retracement or a chase, in case of liquidity, we will liquidate this part before leaving. So it's really complicated to position yourself long here for bullish continuity with targets which could be relatively short, knowing that we are getting closer to the end of the year. But I know that there are people who are doing it. The majority of people are trying to short this market, and in fact press relatively hard on the market, except that it doesn't work like that, given that we find ourselves systematically in bullish accelerations to liquidate these people and continue to push upwards. As long as we have people who are in shorts with a lot of leverage, we will continue to push north and continue to climb. And what's more, if we ever have a continuation of rumors about the validation of the ETF, well, at that moment there, we will continue to accelerate upwards. There should be no doubt about that. At the level of Kingfisher, what is interesting to see is that we find ourselves once again on the CVDs, which are in the process of weakening. Well, for me, it is rather classic, in which we do not is more aggressive at the market level. What is interesting to see is that we have here the same thing that we have already experienced here. Will we really have a week of lateralization before to be able to start again with an upward or downward acceleration, and therefore a CVD which will continue to go down to potentially go lower, and therefore at this moment we will have a dynamic which will be marked by inversion between the aggressiveness of the market and the acceleration of the course. So that would mean that buyers are running out, given that we will be less and less aggressive despite the rise in price. And generally, this is a sign of reversal. This will be something to watch out for. We don't have, not yet, the information. We will have to wait here for the lateralization and potentially see the CVD, which breaks. Here it is, the water which was carried out on the perp. And here at the level of the spot, namely that the spot is when it is even more aggressive than the perpetual, something which is quite rare, that we haven't seen it in a relatively long time. Moreover, speaking of views for a long time, we have broken again a low at the level of open interest. This means that people are in the process of reducing the leveraged positions that they are in the process of to have, which is rather positive, is exactly the echo that we are having there. That is to say that the movements are being pushed mainly by spot, which is rather positive for the whole market, and in which here we have a small acceleration of the top traders, which we will have to monitor. I think that it is a form of reduction of the hedging position. That is to say that in all cases here we have a real part of reduction of the shorts because there is a possibility of reacceleration too, which is rather something classic. We'll stop for today. In fact, if you haven't watched the video I made on Sunday, which is really about the notion of FOMO, I invite you to watch it. I think it will speak to you a lot in relation to how you are currently feeling or how you have felt in recent weeks. And if you like the video I made today and my content, don't forget to leave me a like and a comment. It supports the channel. And above all, it makes me very happy. And we meet again, 13:30 for a video on OP.